I was just a child when it all began. Our old house stood quietly in the middle of a vast land, surrounded by endless trees. Everywhere you looked, there were thick, ancient trees: mango, jackfruit, banyan, and one gigantic tamarind tree that towered over everything else like a silent guardian. The place was so dense that even the sunlight struggled to reach the ground. No matter if it was noon, our yard always looked like twilight. During the day, the sound of birds and insects echoed between the trees. But when the evening came, everything turned different. The wind would stop blowing, the leaves would go still, and yet, it always felt like someone was watching us from behind those shadows. Sometimes, while playing outside, I could feel a pair of unseen eyes following me from the direction of the tamarind tree. I would look back. There was nothing, just that black, twisted trunk and hundreds of hanging roots, swaying softly, even when there was no wind. At night, the silence became unbearable. We could hear footsteps circling our house, slow, dragging steps as if someone barefoot was walking over dry leaves. Whenever my father went outside to check, the sound stopped. But the moment he came back inside, it started again. My mother used to tell us not to look through the windows after dark. She said, "If something looks back at you, it will follow you forever." We laughed at her words back then, but deep inside, we were scared. Every shadow outside looked like a figure standing still. Every branch creaking sounded like a whisper. One evening, while I was helping my brother collect fallen twigs near the tamarind tree, I noticed something strange. The air there felt colder, unnaturally cold, as if the warmth of the sun never touched that part of the yard. My brother stopped suddenly and whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought it was just the rustling of leaves, until I realized there was a faint breathing sound coming from the direction of the tree. Slow, deep, like something alive hiding behind the roots. We dropped everything and ran back inside. My grandmother scolded us for being scared of nothing. But that night, long after everyone fell asleep, I lay awake listening to that same sound again. Soft breathing mixed with a low whisper, coming from outside my window. When I gathered the courage to look through the curtain, the yard was pitch dark, but in the faint light of the moon, I saw a shadow standing beneath the tamarind tree. It wasn't moving. It wasn't human. It was tall, too tall, stretching higher than any man could ever be. And just when I blinked, it tilted its head slowly, as if it knew I was watching. That was the first night I realized something lived among those trees, something that didn't belong to our world. The night after I first saw that tall shadow, everything in our house changed. Even the silence seemed different, heavier, as if the air itself had turned alive. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. I thought maybe it was a dream, or just my imagination playing tricks. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't. That thing had looked at me not like a dream looks at you, but like something real that knows you exist. A few nights later, I woke up again. There was no reason to, no sound, no movement. Yet my eyes opened on their own, as if someone had whispered my name in the dark. I lay still for a moment, listening. Then I heard a dragging sound, like someone slowly walking across wet soil. It was coming from outside, right near my window. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. I tried to wake my brother, but he was in a deep sleep, breathing softly beside me. The sound grew closer. The wooden wall beside my bed began to creak. A slow, painful groan. I wanted to scream, but fear locked my throat. And then, I saw it again. Through the thin curtain, I saw the outline of a figure standing beneath the tamarind tree. The same place, the same silence. But this time, the figure wasn't still. It was moving its head slowly from side to side, as if searching for something. A faint, low hum filled the air. It wasn't a song, more like the vibration of a deep voice, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. The leaves above began to rustle violently, though there was no wind. The branches twisted, stretching toward the figure like arms trying to hold it. And then something happened that froze my blood. The shadow started to grow, not by moving closer, but by rising higher, its shape stretching upward until it touched the lowest branches of the tamarind tree. Its arms were long, hanging unnaturally low, the fingers reaching almost to the ground. The moment it lifted its head toward my window, the world outside went dead silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. I couldn't breathe. The air around me felt thick, pressing against my chest. And then 3 heavy knocks on the wooden wall beside my bed. Thud, thud, thud. Slow, deliberate, as if the thing was tapping just to remind me it knew I was there. I screamed. My brother woke up instantly, and the lights came on. My parents rushed into the room, asking what happened. I pointed toward the window, but there was nothing. No shadow, no sound. Only the tamarind tree swaying gently, as if mocking me. They told me it was a nightmare. But that same night, something else happened. From my parents' room, my mother suddenly shouted she saw a dark handprint on the inside of her window glass. Large, smudged, wet, as if someone had pressed their palm against it just moments before. The next morning, we found strange marks in the soil beneath the tree. Not footprints, but deep round impressions, like someone had been standing there for hours, sinking slowly into the earth. That night, no one slept. The dogs in the neighborhood barked wildly, all facing our house, all howling toward the tamarind tree. And as the wind rose, I heard that same deep humming again. This time louder, closer, more menacing. I didn't look outside anymore, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't just see it. It would see me again. Days passed after that dreadful night, yet the fear refused to leave. The adults tried to convince themselves that everything was normal, that whatever we saw or heard was just imagination. But the air around our home told a different story. The tamarind tree no longer looked like a tree. It looked like something alive, something that could see us, listen to us, even breathe among us. It started with the sound of falling fruits. Every afternoon, we would hear a dull thud, 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 as if ripe tamarinds were dropping to the ground. My brother and I would rush outside with a small basket to collect them, but when we reached the spot, there was nothing there. No fruits, no movement, only the dry leaves scattered across the damp earth. We would look up and see the branches trembling softly, even though the air was completely still. Sometimes, as we stood there confused, we could feel a faint vibration beneath our feet, like something deep underground was breathing slowly, making the soil expand and contract with every exhale. One afternoon, Arthur stayed outside longer than usual. When he returned, his face was pale, his eyes wide open, his lips trembling. I asked what happened, but he just said one thing. It moved. At first, I thought he meant a branch, but he shook his head. No, the whole tree. That evening, when he calmed down enough to speak, he told us everything. He said he was standing near the tamarind tree when suddenly, the trunk began to bend, not because of the wind, but as if something unseen was pushing it from behind. The branches leaned downward until their tips almost touched the ground, and then, without any wind, they rose back up again. It was breathing, he whispered, like it's alive. My parents didn't believe him. They thought maybe it was just his fear playing tricks. But that night, my brother woke up screaming. He said he dreamt that someone was standing under the tree calling his name in my mother's voice. But when he looked, it wasn't her. It was something tall and thin, with no face, just darkness where the eyes should have been. The next morning, things got worse. We began hearing whispers inside the house, faint, almost like the sound of dry leaves rubbing together. Sometimes they came from the corners of the ceiling, sometimes from under the floor. Every time we tried to listen carefully, the voices stopped, but the smell of damp earth remained, like someone had walked through mud inside the house. Then, strange things began happening, one after another. The water in the earthen pot near the kitchen started rippling at midnight, even when no one touched it. The lamps flickered whenever someone mentioned the tamarind tree, and sometimes, in the quiet hours just before dawn, we could hear a woman softly crying near the tree, a low, sorrowful sound that would fade away if anyone tried to approach. One night, my brother gathered courage and decided to see for himself. He took a lantern and stepped outside. When he came back, his hands were shaking. He said the ground near the tamarind tree was moving, like something beneath the soil was crawling slowly upward. I looked out from the window and saw the earth shifting slightly, as if the roots were alive and twisting from below. And just as my brother closed the door, we heard it. A long, deep sigh that came from the direction of the tree. It sounded almost human, but not quite. From that night onward, no one in our house slept peacefully. The whispers grew louder, the air colder, and every shadow outside seemed to take shape. A tall, thin shape with arms that almost touched the ground. We didn't know it then, but the thing living inside that tree had already marked us. It was waiting, watching, and soon, it would make its presence known in a way none of us could ignore. By the time the third week came, the whole atmosphere around our house had changed. The birds stopped nesting in the branches. Even stray dogs, who used to sleep under the shade of the trees, refused to come near anymore. Every night, the air grew colder, heavier, filled with that same low humming sound that seemed to come from the tamarind tree itself. No one in our house spoke about it during the day, but every face carried the same fear, the same sleepless eyes, the same question: what lives out there? It was my grandmother who finally broke the silence. One morning, she said softly, "This isn't right. Something is living with us." My father didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't ignore the signs anymore: the whispers, the shaking ground, the cold that crawled through the house even in summer. So that evening, he sent someone to call a kabirai, a traditional spiritual healer known for dealing with dark forces. When the kabirai arrived, he was an old man with tired eyes and a voice that carried a strange weight. He stood at our gate for a long time before entering. Then, without saying a word, he walked straight to the tamarind tree. The moment he reached it, he stopped and pressed his palm against the bark. He stood still for almost a minute. Then he whispered something under his breath, words none of us could understand. After that, he turned to my father, his face pale and serious. "This tree," he said, "is not empty." His words silenced everyone. Even the wind seemed to stop. "There are spirits bound to it, not one, but many," he continued. "They've lived here for years, maybe centuries. They don't harm those who respect them, but someone has disturbed their peace." My father frowned. "Disturbed them? How?" The kabirai looked at us all one by one before saying quietly, "Someone here must have cursed them, or tried to drive them away. They are not evil, but they are vengeful when angered. You can feel them in the air, the cold, the whispers, the smell of earth after midnight." He sprinkled some holy water around the tree, chanting softly. The liquid sizzled when it touched the roots. A faint hiss, as if the earth itself rejected it. We watched in horror as thin smoke rose from the wet soil, and the smell of burnt leaves filled the air. The old man stepped back instantly. "They're awake," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "and they're watching us right now." That night, he refused to stay in the house. He told us to keep the lights on and warned us not to step outside until sunrise. Before leaving, he turned to my father and said something that would haunt us forever. "Do not cut the trees, not even a branch. They live here. Let them be. If you harm their home, they will destroy yours." Then he walked away into the darkness, his small oil lamp flickering until it vanished behind the trees. That night was the longest night of my life. The house felt alive. The wooden walls creaked as if something heavy leaned against them. The windows rattled even though there was no wind, and faint, shivering voices whispered from the backyard, voices that weren't human. Around midnight, the sound changed. It wasn't whispers anymore, it was crying, dozens of them, soft, sorrowful, and echoing through the trees, like lost souls mourning something ancient and forgotten. My mother covered her ears, trembling. My brother hid under the blanket. My father stood by the door, clutching a holy book, whispering prayers. When dawn finally came, the crying stopped, but the air still felt heavy, like the night had left a stain behind. And then, my uncle arrived. He had heard everything, and unlike us, he didn't believe in spirits or curses. He laughed when my father told him what the kabirai said. "Spirits? What nonsense. You people are just scared of trees and shadows," he said. "I'll cut them all down tomorrow. Let's see which ghost dares to stop me." We begged him not to. Even the kabirai's words echoed in our minds, "Do not cut the trees." But my uncle didn't listen. That night, the air around the tamarind tree felt different. Silent, waiting, almost hungry. Something was about to happen, and when it did, it would change everything forever. The next morning came quietly, too quietly. Even the birds refused to sing. The sky was dull and gray, heavy with clouds, and the air around the house felt thick, unmoving. as though time itself was holding its breath. My uncle woke early, sharpening his axe outside the house. Each metallic clang echoed through the still air like a warning. My grandmother begged him not to go through with it. My mother cried, clutching his arm, whispering, "Please, don't do it. You don't understand what lives there." But he only laughed. "If there's something in those trees, let it come out and face me," he said. "We'll see who's stronger, me or your ghosts." He took 2 men from the village with him, and together they walked toward the Tamarind Grove. The rest of us stood by the doorway, unable to move, just listening. The first chop came like a scream, a sharp, violent thud that cut through the silence. The sound of the axe hitting the trunk was heavy, painful, like flesh being torn instead of wood. Then came another blow, and another. With each strike, the wind began to stir. Leaves rustled violently overhead, swirling in circles, even though no storm had come. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of earth and rot. By the 5th strike, something changed. The sound of the axe stopped. There was silence. Then, from the direction of the tree, came a deep, hollow groan, not from a man, not from the axe, but from the tree itself. The branches began to shiver, trembling like living arms. And then the wind roared. The men ran. One of them dropped his axe and screamed that the roots were moving. We rushed outside just in time to see the great tamarind tree bending, its trunk arching unnaturally toward my uncle. He stood frozen, his eyes wide, his mouth open, but no sound coming out. The ground around the tree cracked and split, exposing black roots that writhed like snakes. A sound filled the air, a chorus of hundreds of whispers, rising and falling like 1,000 voices crying at once. The leaves shivered violently, and then, from the heart of the tree, something dark emerged, a shadow shaped like a human, but taller, boneless, and trembling as though made of smoke and sorrow. It stepped toward my uncle. He tried to move, but his legs gave way. The shadow reached him, its arm stretching far beyond normal length, and touched his chest. Just a touch. My uncle fell to his knees. His eyes rolled back, his mouth opened, gasping for air, but no sound came out. Then, all at once, the wind stopped. Everything went still. The tree stood quiet again and moving. The men screamed for help and dragged my uncle's body back to the house. He was alive, but barely. His pulse weak, his breathing shallow. His eyes stared at the ceiling as if he was seeing something none of us could. When we called his name, he didn't respond. He only whispered one word over and over again: "Forgive me." Before sunrise, he was gone. The Kabiri came back when he heard the news. He didn't look surprised. He simply stood over my uncle's body, sighed deeply, and said, "They warned you." He turned toward the grove, his voice low but firm. "Their home has been broken. They've taken what they wanted. Now, they will leave." He sprinkled holy water once more, chanting ancient verses. A cold wind blew through the yard, rustling the grass one final time, and then everything went still. After that day, the sound stopped. The whispers vanished. The nights became silent again, but not peaceful. The tamarind tree, and all the others my uncle had cut, withered within a week. Their bark turned black, their branches hollow, as if life itself had drained from them. We buried my uncle near the back of the house. No one dared to go near the grove anymore. Even now, the ground there feels colder than the rest of the land. Nothing grows on it. No bird ever sits there. And though years have passed, every time I walk by that spot, I feel it. That same invisible stare from the darkness. That same pressure in the air that makes it hard to breathe. They say spirits move on when their anger fades. But I know they're still there, waiting, watching, guarding the place that once belonged to them. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, when the moon hides behind clouds, I can still hear the tamarind tree breathe. The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.